and that's one thing that I really needed to understand in general with ADHD. And I think everybody with ADHD needs to understand, you're going to need help. You're going to need help.
Welcome to Living in the Weeds, a series that explores the lived experiences of neurodivergent people who consume cannabis, with your hosts, Jessica of Jessica Riley Writer and Lucy of Lucy's Natural Remedies. Today's guest is Olga, a nurse practitioner with over 2 decades of experience and the owner of Ananda Holistics and Wellness.
Oh. Hi, Olga. Thanks so much for joining us. We'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself. I know you go by the name of Cannabis Nursing on the interwebs. Tell us a little bit about brought you into cannabis.
Okay, so my name is Olga. I'm a nurse practitioner. I've been a nurse for about 20 years or so. I've worked in a lot of places, done a lot of things, but probably in the past 5 years, I've gotten into the holistic nursing, largely because the healthcare system is such a scam. It's so awful. It's so awful, and everything is so insurance based. But there's a whole lot of healing that people are missing out on because we keep redirecting people back to medicine, or to traditional pharmaceuticals. I personally started using cannabis as a teenager. Not really giving much thought to it back then, just kind of enjoying getting high as a teenager. But then I was taking pain medications for fibromyalgia. At least I was told that it was fibromyalgia. This was probably about 10 years ago. And as one does with pain medications, the doses started to kind of escalate. They get higher and higher. And the pain doctor says to you, I think that you might be on a higher dose than you should be. And you're looking at him like, you're the one that prescribed all this. So this was your fault, sir. So in 2018, legal cannabis came to Maryland, and my pain management doctor was like, you're always pissing for cannabis anyway, because I was using it to sleep. So I was just using like weed from, like my kids would get me some, my adult children would get it, and I got my card and got to the dispensary and started finding like edibles and infused oils and things like that, and was able to kind of wean off of the pain medication, and actually got a real diagnosis after that of Ehlers-Danlos. And not that fibromyalgia isn't a real diagnosis, it is, but I was able to, after using cannabis, I felt like I was more in touch with specifically what was wrong, as opposed to just overall, I don't feel good. I had that and a little bit of counseling. I had an easier time just kind of verbalizing the things that were going on. So I was able to get a proper diagnosis. So that's mostly my story, but cannabis has played such a huge role in getting me there. And then on top of that, after I got that diagnosis, I got diagnosed with ADHD, which was hilarious because I got diagnosed with ADHD years ago. Mm-hmm. And kind of ignored it, and then could not figure out for the life of me why I could never get it together. Right? Like I'd never put the two together. I know that I have ADHD. I'm not worried about that, but I am such a mess. I can't remember anything, and I make messes all the time, and I, never put the two together. So finally, I finally got there. Cannabis helped with that as well, though, like just kind of slowing you down and getting you to think a little more introspectively about things and actually go take the testing like you're supposed to.
Well, it's not surprising, Olga, that you ended up having being, I would say, dismissive about your ADHD diagnosis as a woman, because for many, people who are assigned female at birth, when we are diagnosed with ADHD, the impression that we're given of that is that kid running around the classroom screaming and not being able to focus on anything.
Right.
And you would hear the joke of squirrel, right? And
exactly.
I remember I identified with that joke, but I didn't understand how much having a neurodivergent diagnosis would actually play out in other areas of my life, right? Okay. So I also had a late diagnosis. I was diagnosed about 2 years ago. Okay. And all of my life, I had struggled not so much with physical pain, but with anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. And it was also, there was some aches and pains that would come with it. And I dare say that people who are on, under the neurodivergent umbrella have a tendency to deal with other physical pains and issues as well. So it makes sense that those experiences are similar with many people who fall under neurodivergent. So when you first got high, and tell us, sorry, let me back up a little. I like to ask people, what was it like the first time they got high? And then what was it the first time you got high and realized, wait a second, this is different for me than it is like for my neurotypical friend?
This would have been years ago when I was a teenager. I would notice people would get super high. They would smoke and they would just get so high. They'd be giggly. They'd be silly. It just kind of evened me out. And that's when I was like, I wonder if this is normal. Like people would go into these long drawn out descriptions of how, weed would make them, oh, I'm just so couch locked on this. I never got that. I never got that from cannabis. I did notice though that it slowed me down. And that actually kind of what parlayed into, I guess it slows lots of people down, but really with me, I felt like it was a good thing as opposed to I'm too slow now, or I'm not able to move fast enough, or whatever. People, you can't move, you're on weed, you're stuck. It just slowed me down just enough to I'm like, okay, I can actually think. That seemed to be a major difference from what I would hear people that were, they use weed to completely stop or to just, chill, to lay down, to get comfortable. I'm just using it to like stabilize, just to normalize, because otherwise my brain is spinning all day long.
Yes, we've heard that from several other people we've talked to, that cannabis is so helpful for taking you from like 50 thoughts in your head to like 4 or 5 very manageable ones.
I went my whole life not sleeping. I remember being a child and not sleeping well. Now, granted, some of that had to do, I was raised in a very traumatic household. I don't want to say it was like horrifically traumatic or anything, but we had a lot of nonsensical things going on because we didn't have a lot of money. So there were things in the house that could have messed with my sleep as well. But either way, the end result was the same. I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I can remember being 7, 8 years old and wandering around my house in the middle of the night just because I couldn't sleep. Cannabis made such a huge difference for that. And part of that is also on the same spectrum, with the ADHD, it just stopped my brain. I'm just a person that my thoughts will just spin. And that's where the anxiety comes in, right? Because when you keep ADHD kind of leans you towards rumination, with the thoughts, and rumination leads you to anxiety, right? Like, so I find that a lot. So weed kind of breaks that cycle for me, which is huge because that feeds the depression and it feeds the anxiety, that ruminating, that spinning mind. So yeah.
Or when your friends come to you and you're like, you're still thinking about that? And I'm like, was I not supposed to still be thinking about that? Because I thought we were all still thinking about that. I was convinced we were all still thinking about that. No, yeah, for me, cannabis helps not just clear out the 50 thoughts that are going on and stream it down to something a little bit more manageable, but it also helps in a weird way. It both helps and hurts with time blindness, right? Because it allows me to not necessarily feel time the way I would like to feel it. And I say that because when I am sober, I sometimes think 5 minutes feels like 5 hours, right?
Yes.
But if I've medicated, whether it's because I'm more conscious of what's happening or whatnot, and it also depends on the strain, right? If I'm using something that's supposed to be a little bit more of a functional daily a strain, I'm able at that point to gauge time flow a little bit better. What other, like for you're talking about anxiety for your neurodivergency. Some of the things that we've heard people talk about are things like executive dysfunction, rejection, I can't say it, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, feeling like a rejection is there that doesn't even actually exist. What other ADHD characteristics have you found that are able to be helped with cannabis use?
The hyperfixations, it helps a lot with the same thing, just instead of being totally focused on one thing. And I do it a lot with food, I do it a lot with food. I have a lot of food. I don't want to say I have a lot of food hyperfixations. I have one at a time, right? Like, so I'll have one and it might go on for like a year, 2 years, and then I would never want to see that thing again. So right now we're still on tacos, but I would eat tacos every day. Every day I would eat tacos and elotes if I could afford to eat tacos and elotes every day.
Yeah.
But if I will come home, I will smoke, and then I'm like just hungry, right? So it kind of, that's another thing is I don't have a whole lot of appetite either. I thought it was related to stimulants, but I stopped taking stimulants years ago, but the appetite never returned. So
Well,
can't help a lot with that.
they say that neurodivergent people have trouble reading body cues of hunger in particular, right? Or thirst.
Yes.
And so we will feel something, be like, oh, whatever, and then keep working and not realize that that's the cue for you're hungry. And then 4 hours later, it's, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Horrible with this. I'm horrible with this because then I'm just a bitch in the afternoon and I'm like, I don't know what's wrong. I'm just angry at everybody. And I realize I haven't eaten and it's like 2 o'clock and I haven't eaten or had a drop of water all day. It's ridiculous. The time blindness is one of those, the only thing I've found to help with that. Nothing helps with that. The only thing I've found to help for myself with that is setting timers and alarms. Of course, you have to remember to do that, but that's a rough one. Time blindness is definitely a rough one. I do.
But you said food because it took me so long to understand that I wasn't craving. I was hyper fixating because, I read all the studies and they're like cravings pass within, 4 to 12 hours. And I'm like, I think about this for days on end.
Weeks, months even. Oh my goodness. And I will be so addicted to, and it's so funny because this is a thing my children remember. They're adults now. They remember this. They're like, oh, remember that year that you would only eat watermelon? That's it. I'm like, oh yeah, when you were like 17, 16, yeah. They spotted these things years ago. That and going places and not remembering. I have a horrible memory to where I'd gone in and seen a neurologist because I thought that I had an accident earlier in the year. I had a concussion. I just swore there was something wrong with my brain. I was like, my memory is horrible. And he was kind of like, well, what was your memory like before the accident? I was like, yeah, it was horrible then too. So he's like, yeah, when I went back in this last time, he was like, you have really severe ADHD. Like there's nothing wrong with your brain other than what was wrong with it before.
You're like, do I get my money back for this? Come on.
Right. I'm like, I didn't come here for this. But he also, the first thing he wanted to do is medication. And I'm like, because that interferes with my sleep. And I just don't like stimulants. Also, I found that stimulants, unlike cannabis, this is why I just didn't even bother with the stimulants anymore. Anyway, all the stimulants do is make me do the same things I was doing before, just faster. So if I was hyperfixating on something for the day, I'm just going to extra hyperfixate because now I'm on Adderall. It's not helpful. Cannabis literally just kind of brings it down for me.
Yeah. I tried stimulants when I was officially diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And I did that for about almost 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And it just didn't end up working out for me. Instead, I'm leaning more towards cannabis, diet, and exercise while my body still allows me to do that, right? Mm-hmm. But for some people, I know that it can be life-changing and life-saving. Mm-hmm. But going back to the food thing real quick, I was wondering how, for me, I wasn't aware that I was hyper fixating on food. I would just know, like, one day I would go into the refrigerator, right? And I'm like, oh, there's 20 things of yogurt in here because I went grocery store shopping and I had to buy all the yogurt. And now I cannot eat this yogurt to save my life. Like my throat closed, gagging on the spoon. Like I cannot do it. And it's frustrating because there you have a fridge full of food, right? And like you can't eat it. Right. So the cannabis at that point would really help me, in particular in the morning when I was like, my anxiety would be really high at that point in time. And I was like, okay, my body's in fight or flight. The last thing it wants to do is try to digest something, particularly something that I can't even pass through my throat because I'm gagging at the idea of eating it. And I couldn't understand what that was, right? And then like one day you open up the fridge and that safety food is just, it's just
not there, right? And the dopamine is not dopamining. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It is just not a safe option anymore. But the reality is that, especially for people who are neurodivergent, diet is part of the equation, right? And so if we're not eating at a regular interval, things start to suffer. We start to forget things. We start to take things personally that we might not have supposed to take personally. We forget to send that email out. Like, those things happen, and it's imperative. And if cannabis can help you eat throughout the day on a regular basis, then I say, let's do that, right? Let's go for it. In terms of consumption.
It's also interesting though, because there are some things that cannabis can't help with. I have a lot of texture issues when it comes to food. I'm very driven by texture when I eat. If I don't like the texture, I can't eat it. I love the flavor of grapes. I can't eat them. So even smoking can't give me back my comfort food if I'm like, oh, this texture is done for me now.
Yeah.
I feel with the textures, like tofu, and everybody's like, tofu doesn't taste like anything. I'm like, I can't swallow it. Just the texture. It's the texture. I know it doesn't.
Why does it feel like that?
I don't know. Right. Why is it squishy? I don't want squishy food. Also, somebody tried to feed me alligator one time, and I just couldn't get past the fact that it was alligator. My kids ate it. They said it was fine. It tastes like chicken, but I personally could not get past the alligator thing. Sometimes I wonder how far up on the spectrum ADHD actually is. It's so similar. There's so many similarities to like high functioning autism that it's, I actually had done some research into that, just out of curiosity. And it is hard to tell that. And also trauma can play into there too. So especially if you have all three of those going on, it makes it very, very difficult.
I had seen somewhere that they're looking at neurodivergency as not a color wheel with like pies, but kind of like those little pixelated circles.
Good.
And that's how, what color do you have? Do you have a lot of green? Do you have a lot of red? Like that kind of area to help you understand what diagnosis, right? What title helps you the most. My boyfriend has 2 children that are autistic, and they're high functioning autism. And there's a lot of stuff that they have that has been identified as autistic that I identify with. Right. And I'm like, wait a second, mine's ADHD. I thought,
right.
That's supposed to be a lot of overlap that happens, particularly with sensory things. For me, I realized that cannabis was helping me with those sensory items, right? So in the sense of, and again, this is always depends on the terpenes and the strain, right? Because like some of them will make you feel things a little bit more intensely, right? And other strains will help kind of put like the piano damper pedal on life is what I call it, right? Where it's like put some headphones on kind of. And so whenever I needed that kind of like headphone effect to life, I would lean towards a more indica leaning strain, right? Yes. And that would help me feel like the lights in the room weren't as bright. The noise wasn't nearly as loud. But if I was leaning on something that was more of a sativa with some pinene in it, I was a beat, the vibrations were higher, and I felt things more intensely. So I don't know if you've had similar experiences like that or not.
Oh yeah, definitely. I love a robust terpene profile, and I like it if it's balanced, but it's not, you can't always get that. Terpene isolates seem to help a lot. Like THCV is really good for daytime just by itself, right? So like that, and then maybe some CBD, but I do prefer like isolated terpenes, isolated cannabinoids, not terpenes, cannabinoids for daytime treatment. It just, for me, that works really, really well when I can get my hands on them.
So are you medicating then more with like vape pens, since you're talking about isolated cannabinoids, or how are you able to do that?
Generally tinctures. So
Okay.
I like to throw tinctures in my coffee in the morning. Sometimes I throw, like I'm a big user of obviously herbal medication. Ashwagandha is another one that I like a lot in the morning. So I can throw that in there, maybe a little bit of matcha because that has a whole lot of caffeine in it. And I'll throw all that right into my coffee and make like a mud water kind of thing, but it's good. It's eye-opening. I should probably cut back on my caffeine a bit, but I figure since I'm not taking stimulants, I'm going to give myself the caffeine. So.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned tinctures. I always forget about that as an option for medicating because it's just I'm generally I gravitate towards smoking the flower, right? And whether it be a joint form, I used to be a bong girl. My lungs are getting old. I'm preferring the joints these days, but it's interesting, like because tinctures can be very what's the word I'm looking for? Not flexible, but versatile.
Yeah, flexible. That's a perfect word. I personally have always used a lot of tincture just because one, you could make it at home. It's pretty easy to make, for like whole plant. But the isolates, I like long acting medication, right? Because I don't have time at work to stop and medicate again. Vapes are great. But for me, after 2 hours, the vape effects are gone, right? Like all the way gone. And then I got to find time and having ADHD, I don't always have the time because sometimes I'm just forget. And then I'm irritable or, whatever symptom I was dealing with that vape comes back. So I like tinctures because if you put it under the tongue and then swallow it, you generally get like a first pass from the absorption under the tongue and then a second pass from what you've swallowed that goes through the liver. Yep. So you get like a good 8 hours of coverage.
Yeah. We forget to eat. How are we supposed to remember to medicate? Like
exactly that part.
Until it's too late, right?
I love a CBD tincture just like to have on hand at all times. Like I recommend it to people if they're just starting out. I recommend it to people with ADHD because it's just a good way to start to boost your immune system, your endocannabinoid system in a way that's not going to make you high or paranoid or full of anxiety. It's just an introduction to the plant that is very approachable. It's smoke-free, it's long-lasting. Like I love a CBD tincture.
Me too.
So
it's good for so many things.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying it's good for so many things too. CBD tincture, oh my goodness.
So what is an ideal THC percentage for you? Because we've noticed, or at least I've been talking a lot about it, is the fact that here in the Maryland area in the DC market, the strains keep increasing in THC. And this seems to be kind of like a national trend of the THC chasers, right? And it's gotten to the point that I think it's very harmful. I have been medicating since 1996, 95, right? So I've seen the market change and grow. And I hate to be like, back in my day, the THC, we were happy about it, right? Like, but I bought some sour tangy the other day that is 30%. And it made me uncomfortably high. Like absolute and tangy is one of my favorites. Sour diesel used to be one of my favorites. But the limonene, I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I've matured in my age and my hormones are throwing it off balance. What's going on? But starting in April of 2023, limonene and Lucy just don't get along.
Okay.
But I was hoping that the tangy, because I loved tangy, would offset whatever sour diesel limonene was in there. And no, it was absolutely horrible. And like all I can attribute it to this point is that it must be that 30% level of THC. And I bought a quarter of it too.
Right. Oh God. So now you got to get through it. But
no, I tried. I've actually tried cutting it with other like CBD products and stuff, and it is still uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm gonna have to gift it or turn it into. A friend had recommended that I turn it into a tincture with some CBD and see if that works. I was like, and then I'm stuck for 8 hours with an uncomfortable high. I don't know.
But at least then you could like cut it with a lot of CBD oil if you wanted to. I personally, like for daytime use, I could do a 10 or 15 CBD to 1 THC. Like that's very low, very low. I would say a 10 to 1 for during the day is generally what I like. On my I want to say like before I took a tolerance break recently. So before the tolerance break, I was using very heavily, which actually helps a lot with my ADHD symptoms, but it makes, you're kind of zoned out for the rest of the world a little bit because you're, a little bit too high too often. So after this tolerance break, I feel like I'm back at a nice, kind of calm level. I'm back to my 10 to 1. I'd gotten up to like more THC than CBD. So now we're back to like the 10 parts CBD to 1 part THC. And that works really nicely for me with the ashwagandha in the morning.
Nice. Yeah, we've noticed that people like this, the type 2 blend where they're mixing the CBD and THC.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not, it's a higher CBD to THC ratio. We're also hearing people talk a lot about CBG. Are you? Yeah, I love CBG.
Right. I mean, CBG is pretty good. It's good for GI issues. I prefer the ones that make me sleep a little bit more. So, but CBG is very good. I use it a lot for patients that have GI issues more. I personally have not seen a whole lot of benefit from CBG for the neurodivergence specifically, but that doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that I personally have not picked up on that. THCV, I've found a lot of use for.
I'm gonna have to try out the THCV and you try out the CBG and let me know what you think, because usually if it has cherry in it in the strain name as well, it'll have, I've noticed, a higher CBG content. And what we're seeing is it's kind of like if THC and CBD had a little baby, it would feel like CBG, even though CBG is the mother, cannabinoid.
Right.
It feels the other way around because you have a little bit of the euphoria, happiness that you get from the THC, but the focus and clarity that we get from CBD. So it sounds that THCV for your endocannabinoid system has been, following,
nice
box. But
what I did not like was the Delta 8. I did not care for that. I didn't like anything about it. I will probably not try those again.
No, it felt like speed, cocaine, shrooms, and weed all mixed into one. And I was just like, what is going on? No, put it down.
It doesn't taste good. You can taste the extraction that it has to go through to get to that Delta 8 process.
Okay, and that's what it is.
I don't like synthetics because I think no matter what they do to them, you can taste how much conversion that chemical has had to undergo to be from CBD or CBG to, Delta 8 or Delta 10 or HHC or whatever they make it into.
Yeah, I did not realize that's what that tasted. Blech.
Yeah,
and then the effects were just not, regular weed just gives you kind of, at least me, it just kind of gives me that nice mellow, that chill that I can get through my day. That was like you said, I just felt like I was on speed. I was like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And it kind of sped the thoughts up, which is literally the exact opposite of what I want to do.
Yeah, we don't need faster thoughts. We don't need more thoughts. We
right.
like
right.
need an organizer in there more than anything. If you got a file folding system, or folder file, I can't talk. File folding system.
Exactly. There you go.
What was I gonna say? Oh, let's talk about terpenes. Yes. What is your favorite terpene? So I mentioned a little bit that limonene, and I no more, but we've been hearing from people that actually does help. Others are saying that pinene gives them a little bit more of an anxiety, but I like pinene. Yeah. Like, no, don't take away the happy, uppity terpenes from me, world. Like, there's only so many.
Terpinolene was one that had had my heart racing a little bit, but I noticed if you get it like my strain gelato cake, I love gelato cake, that has terpinolene in it. It has pinene in it. Not always my favorite ones when they're the dominant ones, but when they're just kind of in there, like in the middle, they do help a lot. They're very nice, very, very nice. Those upper ones. Limonene, I like limonene. It still works okay for me. except I do not like it anywhere near bedtime because it doesn't make my thoughts race, but it doesn't really promote sleep, right? So I would say my favorite one would probably beta caryophyllene. Just
Ooh.
to get that it does a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I also love terpinolene, however you pronounce that one. It's just got this like nice little sour taste to it.
Yes.
And I like it in smaller doses. And I found that out the hard way, right? Because I fell in love with the taste with it, right? So I was like asking for more. And what was it? Cap's Frozen Lemons.
Okay. Oh, I like that.
That one. That one was a really good one, and it was high on the limonene and the terpinolene. But because it was so high on the terpinolene, it was starting to make me sleepy. And I had never connected that one. I had never put that under like, a sedative version.
Right. Yeah, that one usually gets my mind going.
But yeah, and I've talked to a couple of other people and they've had the same experience. They're like, oh, I use that one for sleep. I'm like, the endocannabinoid system is such a mysterious, wonderful place because like what works for you can give me such a different reaction.
Yep. Have you tried, or has anybody tried psilocybin?
Yes. I actually went on an amazing mushroom hike this weekend with some girlfriends, and it was
I
love that.
I love that.
It was a good time.
I think that's probably helped me with the neurodivergent symptoms, probably more than anything else is a sprinkle of psilocybin and CBD. Honestly, those are like two things I very much like. 3 times a week, like clockwork. I get my little microdose in, and I do mean a microdose, like 0.02 or 0.03.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a microdose. I've heard microdose being like 0.2, 0.3.
I'm doing teeny tiny, just enough. I don't really feel anything, but it does kind of give you like a sparkly, lovely day. And I feel like it, like I can almost feel the neural pathways in my brain go in other directions. That's what it feels like. Like I can come up with different thought processes, right? So I don't have the same ridiculous, thoughts. I'm thinking, oh, okay, I could do this way today. Oh, wonder where that came from. It's usually the psilocybin. Right.
It's neuroplasticity. It's creating new connections in your brain.
Which I've
never tried to microdose it, but I'm interested in the psilocybin and CBD combination because high doses of psilocybin are sedative for me. Like they put me down. I just want to chill.
Me too. Me too. And then like the middle dose, like a half gram, even that I'm gonna be like, oh, look at all the colors.
Are you finding that particular psilocybin strains are more effective than others? Because I did end up doing a little bit of research into it, trying to see, and I found that the it's got a terrible name. It's called penis envy.
It's envy.
Yes.
Envy, you're
so
good.
Sedating.
Those were not my favorite. I had a blue magnolia. That was the first one I ever tried. That one was you ever seen those videos on social media where they're like, oh, this is a simulation of if you took mushrooms? That's what it felt like. Like everything just looked just slightly distorted. I was like, this is pretty cool. Okay. And then but golden teachers are my favorite.
Okay. I've heard good stuff about
are, for me, the most uplifting. The penis envy, sometimes, especially if I don't do the exact right amount, they give me an attitude. So I don't know what, I feel like it's something to do with the name penis because men, but they just give me an attitude. So I love if I can get golden teachers. Those are my absolute favorite. They do right every time. And like I said, that little teeny tiny dose, I put them in a milling machine and just grind them up and just put like a little dusting in the coffee. I'm a coffee person. It's probably another addiction I need to give up, but
the doctors made me give up caffeine. So yeah, it's been awful.
Painful. Yes. Painful. Especially for ADHD person.
Jessica, I can't hear you. What?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay. While we're on the mushroom discussion, have either of you guys tried the Amanita muscaria mushrooms, the red caps with the white spots?
Yes.
What did you think?
I thought it was kind of cool, actually, considering they weren't really supposed to be psychotropic, but they actually make you feel really good, really good. They're just expensive. Like the where I ordered them from, I saw a little place on Instagram that was selling the nootropic. So I tried them.
Legal in a lot of
They
states.
worked really nicely though. Like I felt good all over. They just I was like, I would do this again. I want to try they had like a mushroom blend coffee that was supposed to be made of mostly mushrooms and nootropic mushrooms at that. So that's probably the next thing I'll try. But I'm a big mushroom person in general. Like I just love mushrooms and to eat. But then once I guess it was during the pandemic that I have an adult son that is very much into herbal remedies since he was diagnosed with ADHD as a teenager. So he actually got into the herbal remedies before I did.
And he was like, Mom, let me show you something over here. You're driving me crazy.
Yeah. I was taking, like I said, oxycodone, and they had me, I think, up to like 15 milligrams. And then on top of that, they had me on a pain patch, Butrans patch. So I have this pain patch on. I'm taking these pills. And one day my son I think he sprained his ankle, and he goes to the ER and he gets Vicodin, and he takes one Vicodin, and he was like, how much of this is equal to one of your pills? And I said, that's about half of one of my pills. He was like, so you're taking this 3 times a day? He was like, there's something wrong with you. You need to dry out. He was like, this is it. And then I see you drink from time to time. He was like, so the way I feel right now, you feel like this all day. That's what you're telling me. I felt horrible. I was like, yeah, he's right. He was right.
So, as a nurse practitioner, what recommendations would you give to anybody who's watching this out there and is like, hey, I'm a neurodivergent and I like mushrooms and I like cannabis? What recommendations would you have for them when they're talking to medical professionals? Because I've noticed in your channel, you're very good about helping people know what to say so that their doctors aren't going to turn them away.
Because it feels like such a game at the doctors half of the time. The first thing that I personally did that I didn't even think that was going to help, I'm like, how can a counselor help me? Cognitive behavioral therapy, how could that help for ADHD? It helped immensely. One, because I didn't know a lot of these behaviors that I had were a result of the ADHD. It's a lot easier to try to get things under control when you know why you're doing them. Also, that some of the things that were just going wrong, like a good example is my finances were a mess after my divorce. So I got divorced in like 2014, and my finances have been a mess pretty much until now. Just a mess. It's not that I don't make enough money. They're just messy. Everything is messy. I got to the counselor, and the counselor was like, you actually, this is going to be messy. You're missing things. You're missing pieces. You're only doing half of this. You'll start to track your finances, and then you'll stop, 2 days later. And then the rest of the month is, so you need help. And that's one thing that I really needed to understand in general with ADHD. And I think everybody with ADHD needs to understand, you're going to need help. You're going to need help. You're going to need somebody to give you direction and tell you, this is this, and that is that, or this isn't your fault. This is how you can avoid this again, because you will make mistakes because you have ADHD. So that's the first thing that I thought was really, really helpful. That and she gave me a lot of education and learning and workbooks and things. So that was great. And then absolutely CBD. I know there's so many people out there, they're like, I don't like CBD, it doesn't do anything. One, you're not using enough of it. And two, you're only using it once a day. You're using it a little bit in the morning, or you're hitting your vape once a day, and then you're going over the THC. So of course, I personally find that straight THC, especially if I do a lot of it, makes my symptoms horrifically worse. I start forgetting everything. I start missing everything because I'm high, right? And that's not the goal. The goal is actually to be medicated, not high. So if you're trying to treat your actual symptoms and not be high all day, and that's one thing I need people to be honest about with me. Are you trying to be high all day? Because if you're trying to catch a feeling all day, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with harm reduction. That's great. I'd rather you smoke, use high THC stuff all day than go out there and drink or do anything else. But if you're trying to, specifically medicate for like neurodivergence, you need some CBD in your life, and probably a lot of it. At least especially even if it's eaten, I want it eaten 2-3 times a day, unless you've got some kind of liver problem, then you should definitely talk to your doctor first, because it'll have to be timed out with other medications. But I want them on, matter of fact, even if there's no THC, CBD is so crucial. And if you have ADHD and you're only on THC, I recommend taking a day, even just a half a day. Just take a half a day. Take 12 hours and just use CBD products for that 12 hours. And tell me you don't see a difference, because you will. You will. Those are major ones. Another one I like is, the example of like the diabetic. So for a diabetic, if I have somebody that has uncontrolled diabetes, the first thing that I'm going to do for that patient is I want them to be on a continuous glucose monitor, and I want them to be like on a insulin pump, right? So that they have what's called a basal rate, which is like an underlying rate of insulin that you would get as if your body was making it, right? So I want that same thing for your cannabinoids. I want you to have a basal rate of cannabinoids. I want you to have an underlying cushion of cannabinoids in your system all the time. Not a huge amount, because then you're going to get counterproductive effects. Yeah. But I want you to have probably, at least, depending on what your tolerance is, at least 15 to 20 milligrams of CBD in your system all day long. And if you're already taking CBD, we're probably going to up that number to 25 to 50. And then you can add in THC as needed, but go light on the THC while you're trying to think during the day, because it can be a little counterproductive to trying to be productive.
Yeah, no, it's important to bring up the fact that it's like, are you trying to medicate, or are you trying to get high? And again, no shade. We've all been through those days where it's like, today is just going to be a THC day. Right. But like, there's some days that you realize that, hey, this was just kind of a Band-Aid to get me through things. This THC, this CBD is teaching me how to actually walk, and sorry, that analogy just completely fell apart, because you don't need a Band-Aid to walk.
But we get where you're going with that.
So, Olga, given what you said about the basal rate of CBD, how do you feel about transdermal patches? Have you tried any? Have you found any that you like?
Loved them, but they took them off the market in Maryland. I loved the transdermal. I loved them. And I loved the little pump pens Mary's Medicinal had too. I thought they were phenomenal. I remember putting a patch, the first time I put it was a THC patch. I was going on a flight, and because I figured these aren't even going to work anyway. So I put on the THC patch and also the CBG patch. Oh my goodness. I could feel it, like it felt like it was rising in me. I was like, that's interesting. It's like, they were so effective though. And then when I got there, I had to take the patch off because it worked so well. I thought they were great. I would just, after that, I would cut them into 4 pieces and then put them on. But I loved them. I thought they were wonderful. I thought they lasted for me. It lasted for like a day and a half. They were phenomenal. I wish that somebody would produce that again. I hope they continue to make things like that, the transdermal pens or the transdermal patches, because they were great.
I don't see people talking about them a lot. The inhaler is interesting too, because there are all these different ways to get your cannabinoids in a long-lasting way that you don't have to smoke and you don't have to remember. Like a 12-hour patch, you don't have to do anything if you're on your feet that entire time.
Nothing. You don't have to remember a thing. That's why I loved those. I loved it, and they really lasted. They were much more effective than any narcotic pain patch that I ever used. They were phenomenal, and a CBD one was just. That was like except like, again, that made me a little sleepy because, but when you cut it in half, it was the best medicine. So I hope somebody continues to make those or put those out again, because they were so good. And then the other thing that I would recommend is, tiny doses of psilocybin. And the first time, I tell everybody, the first time they try it, please be with somebody else, because you don't know how it's going to affect you. And it's not quite like smoking weed. It's a little bit, cannabis. It's a little bit different. So,
yeah, but definitely this last time when I did my trip with the girls and we were hiking, there was a moment where I said a prayer of gratitude for all the past crappy trips that I had had so that I could handle myself in that scenario. Because when I had first started doing this, you know, it was always at home in a safe place with everybody. I had to know everybody. And this time I went out and I knew one person. We were outdoors, like in nature. And so it's, yeah, you definitely, even if you've done it so many times, you can still end up having a moment where your thoughts kind of go askew, especially when you've got 50 thoughts running around in your head.
My God. Like all of us always do.
Yeah.
And the other thing is exercise. So that's a thing. And I cannot promote exercise enough. And I'm such a hypocrite because I only exercise like 2 days a week, but I want everybody exercising because people don't understand how good it is for just about everything, but also your mental health. And a lot of things that I think my way through is on a treadmill or while I'm walking or while I'm on an elliptical. It helps you boost up the good brain chemicals, which helps keep your thoughts straight. It just, you get more serotonin, more dopamine, and you function better. It just is, how it is.
Yeah.
I never recommend antidepressants.
Yeah, I find, okay, well, that's good to know. For me, when you're talking about the treadmill, I find that afterwards I'm too tired to let all of those 50 thoughts full flight, right? Like, even if I wanted to, like, it's like, no, we're too tired.
Yes, that part I love too. I took a 3-week tolerance break, which was torture, but I was in the gym every day because, you can just burn yourself out, and that's fine too.
And exercise stimulates your endocannabinoid system. It encourages endocannabinoid production. And endocannabinoids are a huge part of those feel-good chemicals in your brain. So even if you're on a tea break, you can boost your endocannabinoid system through exercise.
This is why I love her. Like, this is
I love anandamide, and that's what I named my little business after, Ananda Holistics. That's your wellness chemical. Like I read an article, a phenomenal article. I loved this article. There's a woman, she has some kind of disorder that she produces massive amounts of anandamide all the time, so she doesn't feel pain. Apparently she had broken something. She broke an arm or her hip or something like that. She was like 90 something year, not 90. She may be like in her 70s. She broke a hip, I want to say. She had no idea she had broken the hip. She just noticed that it wasn't sitting properly and went to the hospital, and they were like, how are you not feeling this? And then post-op, she didn't have any pain. So they actually did some research and found that this woman makes she makes like high amount. That has to be the best disability I have ever heard in my life. Like, she just feels like she's high all the time. She's just happy. And that was it. She was just like, yes, I don't know. Like, she knows depression is a concept, but she has no idea of what it could feel like because she just makes so much anandamide. And I thought to myself, that's gotta be the best thing in the world. That's gotta be amazing. So, yeah.
The universe loves her better.
Right? She's just one of God's favorites, clearly.
She did something in a past life that got her there. So we've got a few minutes left here, Olga. Is there anything that you want to like promote? Like, I know that you're always promoting the fact that you can help register Maryland patients for their cards. Yeah. If you want to.
So Ananda Wellness is my my little business. I do cannabis certifications and also primary care and concierge home visits, wellness consultations online. I do prescriptions and all of that. So if you're looking for somebody to help you manage your health in general, that is more of a health focused, holistic focus. I don't have a problem with the pharmaceuticals, but I do start with the holistic side and then move over to pharmaceuticals if we can't get where we need to with that. So that's me. Please go follow me on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. Yes.
Love it. Is there any topic that we might have missed that you were like, oh, now that we're talking about neurodivergency, I want to make sure that I talk about?
No, I think we covered most of our crazy brains, right? Like, I do. there's a lot of children, because since we have our, the kids, they're able to use cannabis in the school. And I know we have a lot of kids that are autistic and a lot of kids with ADHD. So I really want to encourage their parents to keep up with the CBD use, because a lot of watching the children was what gave me a lot of my model for treating adults, because children react to CBD so well. So I was kind of able to like base how I was going to start dosing adults based on how like 10 and 12-year-old kids would do on it. And I see really, really good reaction times. So if you have a child with neurodivergence, please consider a whole plant CBD product. And there's also that pharmaceutical CBD product, but consider the whole plant first, because that's just an isolate.
Yeah, full spectrum all the way is how I like to say.
But that's it.
Well, thank you so much, Olga. I don't want to take any more of your time.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned you've been a nurse for several decades before this, and you've been a holistic nurse for a couple years. So what is the biggest change that you've seen in incorporating plant medicine like cannabis and psilocybin into your nursing practices? What has that changed for you?
That's such a good question. I can't, there's not a way to quantify in just a couple of minutes how horrible the healthcare system is. I cannot. People are like, I have good insurance. And I'm like, no, you don't, because nobody has good insurance. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. All insurance is a scam. It's all a scam. And the doctor can only do as much as the insurance will let them do. I don't have to deal with that in holistic medicine. With holistic medicine, I can tell the patient, these are the herbs that we're going to try. And the patient goes out and buys those herbs and says, hey, this is working great for me. Or, oh, it might not be working so well. Can we tweak this? The only problem is, sometimes people are used to pharmaceuticals, right? Which kick in a day, 2 days, 3 days. You're gonna have to wait a little bit with plant meds. You need to give it a week. You need to give it 2 weeks to really see the full effects. People don't like to wait. So encourage people. And I think it's the same thing with CBD. It's a cumulative effect. If you take it every day, by the end of the week, you're going to be seeing the outcomes that you're looking for, but you got to keep taking it every day. So I would just encourage people to, if you're gonna start with holistic medicine, stick with it. It definitely works, and you're definitely gonna be better off for it at the end. Just but that's the big one, is that people want right now fix, and sometimes it just takes a little while. But I feel like I'm helping patients like this. Like I actually see people get better. Especially the pain patients. I don't want to see the pain medications are just killing us. The narcotics should never have been as prevalent in this country as they are. It was all for money. So any patient that I can get off of narcotics and onto dabs, and that's amazing, right? Or any patient, when I was working in DC, I was getting patients off the street and getting them in housing because DC allows them to use cannabis. So, we can get them off heroin. Heroin users transition over to dabs, the ones that want to, actually pretty well. So we got a bunch of patients off the street that way. So that was those are things that I love to see, and that's why I stick with holistic medicine, because you actually see outcomes, real outcomes.
I joke with my clients that the D in CBD stands for daily.
I'm gonna start using that. It means daily.
So thank you so much, Olga, for joining us. This has been amazing to hear such an informed opinion about how cannabis can help people with neurodivergency, especially since you've had over 2 decades of experience in the nurse practitioner field. And we really, really appreciate you coming out.
Thanks for joining us for an episode of Living in the Weeds. That's all that we have for today. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe to support the channel, and we'll see you next time.